You know, when you really think about how we navigate our daily lives, we have this deep, almost desperate reliance on cause and effect.
Oh, absolutely. It's everywhere.
Right. Like you flip a switch, the light comes on, you drop a glass on the floor, it shatters. It's very comforting. It gives us this, I mean, let's call it what it is, this illusion of control.
A total illusion, yeah.
But I want you to consider something today. What if that entire system, like every logical sequence you rely on to get through the day, is just a surface level illusion? What if it's specifically designed to keep you from being completely overwhelmed by the actual sheer machinery of the universe?
I mean, we cling to these physical rules because the alternative is, frankly, it's fundamentally terrifying to the human mind. We really like our neat little boxes of causality.
We do.
Without them, the sheer scale of how reality actually operates would just, it would short-circuit our brains entirely.
Yeah, and nowhere are those neat little boxes dismantled more completely than in the source we're looking at today. We are doing a deep dive into Volume 11 of Tahirul Mevlevi's commentary on Rumi's Mesnevi.
It's a profound text.
It really is. We are going to explore this series of deeply interconnected stories from the commentary that just completely strip away that illusion of control we were just talking about.
And the way it does it is so visceral.
Visceral is the perfect word for it. So picture this first scenario for me. There's an Arab caravan stranded in the middle of this brutal, just scorching desert. They are completely out of water, dying of thirst. The commentary actually makes it a point to specifically note that the camels' tongues are hanging out.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a dire, absolute end-of-the-line situation.
Right, it's a moment of absolute physical limitation. In our standard, everyday view of causality, the lack of water in a desert leads directly to death. There's no other logical outcome for these people.
Exactly. But then Prophet Muhammad appears and gives them this highly specific, kind of bizarre instruction. He tells them to go fetch a black slave who is waiting behind a nearby sand dune, and this guy is carrying a single water skin.
Just one.
Just one. So the people from the caravan find this man, but he is incredibly reluctant to help. Like, he actually calls the prophet a sorcerer and a poet, and he practically has to be dragged over to the caravan.
He's fighting it the whole way.
Totally. Yet from this man's one ordinary, regular-size leather water skin, the entire caravan, we're talking dozens of people, all their camels, all their animals, they all drink their absolute fill. And the wildest part, the water level inside the skin never drops a single millimeter.
Which is just a brilliant introduction to a foundational concept in Mevlevi's commentary, this idea of the musibi ul esbab.
Okay, unpack that for us. What does that mean?
It translates roughly to the causer of causes. So the philosophy here asserts that God created that water from absolute nothingness continuously, right there in that exact moment.
So it wasn't really coming from the bag.
Exactly. The water skin itself was entirely unnecessary for the physical creation of the water. It was functioning merely as a veil.
Wait, okay, I'm stuck on the logistics here for a second. If the water is a direct miracle being created continuously out of thin air, out of nothingness, the whole theatrical production with the reluctant slave and the leather bag feels completely unnecessary. I mean, why not just open up a rushing river right there in the sand?
That's the core question, isn't it? And the answer is human fragility. The commentary points out that humanity clings to causes out of sheer ignorance, but also out of psychological necessity.
Like we need the comfort of the cause.
Yes. We're so bound by our physical logic that if the veil of cause is removed entirely, like if a river just erupts from dry sand without any physical container or source, the human mind shatters. It's too raw of an encounter with the divine mechanism.
But you need the prop.
We need the prop. We need to see water pouring from something to accept it, even if the physics of it, getting an endless supply of water from a finite little bag, makes zero sense when you actually look closely.
Yeah.
The physical world is just a psychological safety net.
Okay, so it's not just a physical deception, it's a buffer. The container gives our rational, logical minds something to hold on to so we don't completely panic.
Precisely.
And the story takes that idea of the container a step further, which I found fascinating. After the caravan drinks, the prophet touches the slave's face, and his face turns radiant, like shining like the moon.
A physical transformation.
Right. And then the slave goes back to his master's camp, and his master does not even recognize him.
Not at all.
Like, the master sees his own camel, he recognizes his own water skins, but he looks at this radiant man and actually accuses him of having murdered his slave and stolen his stuff. The slave literally has to reveal his master's deepest, darkest secrets just to prove his own identity.
Which demonstrates just how thoroughly we are manipulated by the veil. The external appearance of the man changed, and the master was rendered completely blind to the underlying reality.
He couldn't see the truth.
He couldn't recognize the truth standing right in front of him because the container had been swapped. It really challenges you to consider, how often you are fooled by the outward appearance of an event and completely miss the reality functioning beneath it.
That is such a good point. And, if the water skin proves that physical objects are just comforting illusions, it kind of forces us to look at the objects and the events that actively cause us pain.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Like those have a hidden architecture too.
Yeah.
And the text addresses this directly. Take this next story from the source. The prophet is preparing for prayer. He reaches down to put on his boot, and out of nowhere, an eagle, or some accounts say a raven, swoops down, snatches the boot right out of his hand, flies high up into the air, and turns it upside down. And a deadly black snake falls out of the boot.
Just a hidden danger lurking exactly where he was about to place his foot.
Exactly. And then the eagle returns the boot, essentially apologizing for the apparent disrespect of snatching it in the first place. So the prophet realizes that what he initially perceived as a major annoyance, like a really frustrating interruption to his prayer, was actually his salvation.
He thought he was being wronged.
Yeah. It reminds me of a controlled burn in forestry. You know how they intentionally set fire to a small patch of trees, literally destroying them to create a fire break?
Yes, to stop a larger disaster.
Right. It looks like a destructive, terrible event on the surface, but it's the very thing that stops a massive wildfire from consuming the entire forest.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it. You sacrifice the underbrush to save the whole ecosystem. The misfortune is a shield. And the commentary takes this concept of the hidden architecture of loss from a minor annoyance, like a stolen boot, to really the most profound human suffering imaginable.
Yeah, this next narrative is incredibly heavy.
It is. It relates the story of a grieving mother. This is the woman who endures the absolutely unimaginable tragedy of losing 20 children. 20 children, with not a single one living past 6 months of age.
I mean, I can't even fathom that level of pain.
It's total devastation. And in her agony, she compares her babies to a rainbow that appears beautifully, but vanishes far too quickly. The destruction of her world is total. But then she has a dream.
A vision, basically.
Right. In this dream, she sees paradise, and she is shown this magnificent sprawling mansion with her name written on it. And she is told that this incredible spiritual reward is the direct architectural result, literally built brick by brick, of her worldly suffering.
That is just, wow, the mechanism of a cosmic exchange. Her material loss, her unimaginable pain, was literally the construction material for her spiritual reality.
Yes, exactly.
And her reaction to this dream completely shifts the paradigm of grief.
It really does. She wakes up and declares that knowing this, seeing the reality behind the veil of her suffering, she would willingly endure that pain for 100 years.
Which is a wild thing for a grieving mother to say.
It is, but she realizes her children were lost to her in the physical realm, but they were not lost to God. The material loss wasn't just this cruel end in itself, but a necessary transfer of energy.
It fundamentally rewrites the purpose of pain. Like, the tragedy doesn't magically go away. She still lost those babies, but the context completely changes the meaning of the loss.
The profound insight here is that material loss is frequently a shield against a greater physical or spiritual catastrophe. The commentary explicitly states that the physical body is just a shell, and sometimes the shell must be cracked, it must suffer, in order for the soul, the core inside of it, to thrive and grow.
But we just see the shell breaking.
Exactly. We mistake the cracking of the shell for the end of the world because we cannot see the soul expanding beneath it. The mother's suffering was the cracking of the shell that built her eternal mansion.
Okay, so if we follow this logic and we accept that hardship is a protective controlled burn and our losses are actually shields, it naturally raises a pretty dangerous question.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
Right. What happens if we just refuse to let anything burn? What if we find a cheat code to bypass the system and avoid all our hardships entirely?
I mean, that is the ultimate human fantasy, isn't it? To have total control over our fate, to keep our wealth, our comfort, and our lives completely insulated from any loss.
Everybody wants that. And the text explores the terrifying reality of that fantasy through the story of Moses and the rooster. So a young man goes to Moses and begs him to teach him the language of animals.
Naturally.
He claims, he wants this knowledge so he can glean deep spiritual lessons from the natural world. But Moses warns him repeatedly. He says, "Do not do this. It is incredibly dangerous to peer behind the veil.
You don't want to know how the sausage is made.
Exactly. But the man refuses to listen. He keeps begging, so God finally allows him to learn the language of just two animals, the dog and the rooster that happen to live in his courtyard.
And, predictably, the man immediately abandons any pursuit of spiritual growth.
Instantly.
He uses this sacred knowledge basically for insider trading.
It really is insider trading. The daily drama in his courtyard becomes this dark comedy of asset management. So the rooster keeps stealing the dog's bread. The dog obviously gets furious. To calm the dog down, the rooster uses his new predictive abilities. He tells the dog, look, do not worry about the bread. Tomorrow, the master's horse is going to die, and you will have a massive feast of horse meat.
Just a total betrayal of the master.
The master is eavesdropping on them. He hears this, panics about the financial loss of his horse, runs out to the market and sells the horse that very day. He avoids the loss entirely, and the poor dog gets nothing.
The master thinks he has successfully outsmarted the cosmic system. He's beating the market.
He's feeling like a genius. But the next day, the rooster tells the dog, hey, sorry about yesterday, but tomorrow the mule will die, so you'll get mule meat. The master hears this, runs out, and sells the mule. Avoids the loss again. On the third day, the rooster predicts the master's slave will die. The master sells the slave.
He's just liquidating everything.
Yeah, he is tallying up all his new wealth, completely thrilled with his cleverness and his pristine balance sheet. He thinks he's untouchable.
But he is completely blind to the architecture of loss we just discussed earlier.
Yeah.
He doesn't realize he is systematically dismantling his own fire breaks.
So here's the climax of the story. On the fourth day, the dog is furious. He is starving. He mocks the rooster, calls him a liar and a fake prophet. But the rooster defends himself and reveals the horrifying truth. He says, I was not lying. The horse died, the mule died, the slave died. They just died for their new owners.
The decrees still happen.
They still happen. And then the rooster drops the hammer. He says, tomorrow the master himself will die, and the heir is going to slaughter a cow for the funeral, so you will finally get your meat.
Wow.
The master hears this and runs absolutely terrified to Moses, just begging for help.
It is a stunning, fatal reversal for him.
It is, but I want to look at this from the master's perspective for a second, because it feels like a really harsh penalty. I mean, wasn't he just being financially savvy? If you have insider knowledge that your stock is going to crash tomorrow, you sell the stock today.
That's the logical move, yeah.
He was simply protecting his assets.
Well,
why is he being punished with death for basic self-preservation?
Because his definition of self-preservation was fundamentally flawed, and he entirely misunderstood the mechanics of fate. In this philosophical framework we're discussing, a decree of misfortune has a specific cosmic momentum. Think of it like an arrow that has already left the bow.
It's already in the air.
It's in the air. The universe demanded a toll from this man's life. Those financial losses, the horse, the mule, the slave, they were meant to be the shields absorbing that momentum. They were his armor.
Oh, I see. So the misfortune wasn't tied to the objects themselves. It was directed at his household in general.
Precisely. By liquidating his property, by selling off his shields just to avoid a temporary financial sping, he essentially removed the crumple zone of his own life.
The crumple zone. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, he dodged the toll, which meant the full momentum of that decree, that arrow, had nowhere left to land but on him. He transferred the fatal blow directly to himself.
So the tragedy was coming regardless, and his cleverness, his insider trading, just moved him directly into the crosshairs.
Exactly. When he ran to Moses, Moses essentially told him, look, the arrow has already left the bow. I cannot stop it. The only thing Moses could do was pray that the man at least died with his faith intact.
That is chilling.
This story is the ultimate warning against tampering with the veil. Trying to manipulate fate with partial knowledge is a profound mistake. The commentary uses a brilliant metaphor here to describe it. It says, it is like eating clay when you could have rose jam.
Eating clay.
Yes, it represents a fundamental misunderstanding of what actually nourishes us. We think preserving our wealth of clay is the highest good, completely unaware that losing it might be the very thing preserving our lives, which is the rose jam.
The irony of hoarding the clay while rejecting the rose jam because we just do not understand the cosmic economy. So, okay, if we synthesize all of this, we cannot cheat fate without destroying ourselves. Our daily annoyances might actually be deflecting fatal blows. Our deepest material losses are constructing our spiritual realities. If all of this is true, then our entire view of the ultimate end, like the biggest, scariest loss of all, which is death, has to be completely reevaluated.
It requires a total paradigm shift. I mean, if the physical world is a veil and our physical bodies are just the temporary containers like the water skins, then the end of the physical body is simply the lifting of that veil.
And the source material gives us two incredible historical accounts to illustrate this ultimate shift in perspective. First, we have Hamza, the uncle of the Prophet. In his old age, he goes into battle completely bare-chested, no armor at all.
Which is essentially a death wish in traditional terms.
Right. People are shocked. They come up to him and actually quote scripture to him saying, "Do not throw yourselves into destruction." Like, what are you doing? And Hamza's reply is legendary. He says that when he was young, he saw death as destruction. But now, with his spiritual eyes open, he sees the hidden reality. He sees the spiritual army. He no longer views death as a dark abyss. He views it as an open door.
Because he has stopped looking at the terrifying surface of the veil, and he's finally looking directly at the mechanics functioning behind it.
He sees past the illusion. And the second example is Bilal on his deathbed. His wife is beside him, and she's weeping, and she cries out, "Alas, you are going into exile."
A very natural human reaction.
Completely natural. But Bilal, whose face the commentary describes as blooming like a lily, just radiant and joyful, he corrects her. He says, "No, what joy. My soul is finally returning from exile to its homeland." He wasn't leaving home. He was finally returning to it.
And the commentary unpacks this mindset with a highly relatable analogy for you to consider. Think about the physical world not as a grand open space, but as a terribly narrow, incredibly humid, scorching hot bathhouse, a hammam.
Okay, getting claustrophobic.
Or, to make it even more visceral, imagine you are wearing a pair of shoes that are 2 sizes too small, and you are forced to walk across a vast, endless desert in them.
Oh man, just imagining the friction and the blisters makes my feet ache.
Right. Now, to an outside observer who is not wearing those shoes, the desert might look beautiful. The sunset is gorgeous. The dunes are sweeping. But to the person wearing the tight shoes, the scenery does not matter at all.
You literally can't focus on anything else.
Exactly. Their entire reality is reduced to the agony of their constrained feet. Every single step is pain. According to this philosophy, death is simply the act of finally, blissfully, taking off those tight shoes.
Taking off the tight shoes. That analogy completely reframes why we fear the end. If death is just taking off the shoes, then the experience of it is entirely dependent on how you view the world. I mean, I read that everyone's death takes the color of their own soul. If you are terrified of it, if it looks like a monster to you, you are really just terrified of your own reflection. You're clinging to the tight shoes because you have convinced yourself that the shoes are your actual feet.
That's exactly it. The person who fears death is the one who believes the physical veil is the only reality that exists. They are the master in the courtyard trying to save his horse, unaware he is sacrificing himself to do it. The person who welcomes it, like Bilal, understands that the physical body was merely the container holding the miracle.
Let's take a breath and look at the philosophical journey we've mapped out today. We started in a scorching desert, realizing that the cause and effect sequences we rely on, like needing a physical leather bag to hold a miracle, are just psychological buffers to keep our minds from shattering. We saw a snake fall out of a stolen boot, teaching us that our daily frustrations and even our most devastating losses are often hidden fire breaks protecting us from worse fates.
The crumple zones.
The crumple zones. We watched a man outsmart himself into an early grave because he tried to use a cheat code to avoid the cosmic tolls that were actually saving his life. And finally, we arrived at the realization that the ultimate fear, death itself, is nothing more than taking off a pair of incredibly tight shoes.
It is a complete inversion of how modern society conditions us to view reality, success, and loss. We are taught to accumulate the clay and fear the breaking of the shell.
It really challenges you to look at your life right now, the things that deeply frustrate you, the things you have lost, the things you are desperately trying to control, and ask yourself, what is the actual architecture operating beneath this? Am I looking at the water skin, or am I looking at the miracle?
And to leave you with one final fascinating concept from the source material to explore on your own, let's look at something you do every single night. We've spent time discussing death as the ultimate removal of the tight shoes. But the commentary notes that we actually get a daily trial run. It describes sleep as a temporary taking off of the tight shoes.
Wow, I had never considered sleep through that metaphysical lens before.
It frames sleep as a state where the soul is temporarily freed from the narrow bathhouse of the body's prison. The source even goes so far as to state that sleep is the property of the saints. It is a daily, sanctioned taste of liberation from the physical veil.
So tonight, when you close your eyes, I invite you to consider your dreams not just as random neurons firing or your brain processing the events of the day. Think of it as a nightly, temporary liberation from the narrow confines of the physical world. A small, fleeting taste of that profound, expansive freedom that Bilal felt at the very end of his life. It is your chance to slip off the tight shoes just for a few hours before you have to put them back on and walk into tomorrow.